Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Critical Role and why Critical Role is failing with Bell's Hells Season 3. Alright, so I think this is a complex issue, really fascinating. Critical Role is right now in its Season 3, and you do not have to, like, you can spin around on the internet and throw a foam rock, bonk, you're going to hit a critter saying, hey, Season 3 sucks. Like if you're having a hard time, like just search again, but you'll find them. Like it's being widely discussed. This is by far the worst season ever. I want to posit a reason why. Right? I think there's there's a small number of reasons why this could be happening, and this is another reason why I think it could be happening. And that reason is the table is full, right? I want to talk about this because I think this is a very real problem in Dungeons & Dragons. We have not really talked about this enough, and we need to talk about it now because I think Critical Role is absolutely struggling with this. It is very real. And that is, the table is full, man. No, you cannot play at this Dungeons & Dragons table. This is a harsh reality. I think a lot of, we love Dungeons & Dragons, right? Especially if you're listening to this channel. Well, you have to have a deep love of Dungeons & Dragons to be listening to this channel, right? Like, yeah, there's just no way around that. So, we love Dungeons & Dragons, and it's important, and we want to make, and we want to share it, right? But the reality is, the harsh reality is, I am starting to think the optimum Dungeons & Dragons table is one-on-one. One dungeon master, one dungeon performer, right? And that's the other issue, is we are arriving at the day when we now have dungeon performers. We've had a bunch of Dungeons & Dragons players. Thank you, that was nice. We're now graduating to dungeon performers. People who engage in dealing with identity vessels, right? Like, so others would call an identity vessel a character sheet or a player character, right? But a dungeon performer is someone who pours themselves into an identity vessel, which, Gary brought us these identity vessels. I think that's really what Dungeons & Dragons is about. It's about creating an identity vessel. We pour ourselves into it, and when we come out, I think part of our identity is left within the vessel, right? And then when we pull ourselves out, part of our identity is now new. It is coming from the vessel, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about Dungeons & Dragons is when it's done fully, you reach this point where you are dealing with an exchange of attributes, and I think Gary was extremely intentional with his language, right? He's like, these are attributes. This is your alignment, right? And none of this was ever about a game. None of this was ever about characters, right? This was always about identity, in my humble opinion, right? And so basically, in order to engage a narrative at the incredibly deep lengths that Gary called us to, I think the most optimum table is one-to-one, right? Now, that, right now, Dungeons & Dragons is misshaped, right? One of the biggest misshapes of Dungeons & Dragons right now is the 4-hour game. It's terrible, right? And it really pushes a lot of people away, right? And by the way, people play even longer hours, I can't, I get people right here on the channel telling me they play 8 12-hour sessions, right? This is a misshape. It's pulling something to the point where it's stretched and even broken, right? So we should be running movie length Dungeons & Dragons, and frankly, I have made it a very significant goal, and I've achieved that goal. I can actually run 1-hour Dungeons & Dragons. I can fully execute an actual full adventure in a single hour, and I have to use a lot of physical, essentially talismans to do that, and I have to use a lot of methods to do that. But the reality is, I've gotten it down to that. But the reality is, we should be moving toward a one-to-one Dungeons & Dragons table, right? One dungeon master, one dungeon performer. And I think the reason why we should do this is to do exactly what Joe Manganiello pointed us to in the last D&D Direct, in the 2023 D&D Direct. Link below, where he clearly, flat out says people are transforming their lives and the cultures they live in with Dungeons & Dragons. Just says it flat out in a D&D Direct, right? Like, it's not me saying this anymore. Like, Joe Manganiello is like, it's a game, wink, wink. Or anything like, come on, like, if you listen to that quote and you're like, this is a game, you ain't paying attention, right? Like, you know, in my humble opinion, right? So, you know, it's, yeah, like, they said the quiet part loud, right? Yeah. Like, so, it is really, really fascinating. So, we should be moving to this one-to-one, but Matthew Mercer is doing the opposite. He is not learning any lessons at this point, and I think I don't think he was ever greedy, but it's hard to count. I really don't think Matthew Mercer ever, like, intended to become a millionaire off of Dungeons & Dragons, but that's what's been happening, right? And the reality is, he is packing his table. I'm not kidding, on one of the sessions, there was 10 people at the table. 10, right? He's not telling any story for anybody, right? He's not transforming anyone's lives at that table from a perspective of giving them wisdom, giving them knowledge, giving them answers, right? He can't, because he can't give them any time or attention, right? And every single story that should be told with a play, there is absolutely no room for a dungeon performer at that table. There is only room for Dungeons & Dragons players, because every single one of their stories has to be 1 centimeter deep. And the reason why is there's 10 people begging for attention from the dungeon master and trying to get their narrative through, and you cannot tell a story with 10 people at the table. And I think Matthew Mercer is proving that. There are simply too many players at the table, and he has not guarded the time necessary to tell a meaningful story with anyone at the table. There just literally isn't enough time, right? And he has diluted Bell's Hell so far that it has no value. That is why I think right now Critical Role is failing. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.